It's a perfect night for mystery and horror. The air itself is filled with monsters.
Universal's classic monsters on Blu-ray High Def.
The whole world's frightened to death.
From the studio that launched a legacy of monster movies comes 8 legendary films.
Crazy am I? We'll see whether I'm crazy or not.
Dracula.
Children of the night, what music they make.
Frankenstein.
The brain of a dead man waiting to live again in a body I made.
The Invisible Man. Creature from the Black Lagoon. The Bride of Frankenstein.
She hates me.
Phantom of the Opera.
I told them there'd be death and destruction if they didn't let you sing.
The Mummy.
Thou shalt rise again.
And the Wolfman. Starring Hollywood's most iconic horror talent. Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, Claude Rains, and Lon Chaney Jr. Experience horror like never before. All digitally restored in high definition, 6 times the resolution of DVD. Loaded with hours of bonus features.
It's alive! It's alive!
Universal's classic monsters.
I hope you will like it.
Hello, it's me, Kevin Vonesper. I did it. I found a video for the intro. I am not sponsored by Universal Monsters, but I could be. Just throwing it out there, Universal. I got a show. I can play your trailers anytime you want. And welcome to Found a Phantom, my Phantom of the Opera YouTube live streaming show that happens. Hey, it happens on Phantom Fridays sometimes when I'm not working and when I got someone to talk to. It's gonna happen. Like, share, subscribe if you want to make this happen more often. I would love to. I need some support and love. And anyways, today we have some great. All right, we're just gonna talk forever. I think we're just gonna basically start the show and just go from there. But I'm gonna run the intro first because I can't forget that. Found a phantom, found a phantom, found a phantom. Hello, AJ Danna.
Hello, Kevin. Thanks for having me on tonight.
Thanks for being here. I needed somebody to talk to about my Universal Classic Monsters. I have so many questions about that, about you. I don't know even where to start. AJ, have you found any phantoms recently?
Yes, most recently, I received my copy in the mail of Becky Laugh's Phantom graphic novel, Book 1, which is just as beautiful as I was expecting, and I've really enjoyed reading that.
Yeah, I also got my Becky Laugh book in the mail. Although I don't know if she's watching, but I'm expecting another one because I shipped that one off as a gift. But so there should be another one coming my way. But I did get the posters. Oh, did you see the posters?
I did see the posters.
Yeah, they're in there somewhere. Let me see if I can grab them.
Because
we like to
art of the grand staircase
is
just marvelous.
We want to plug our friends. Becky, if you're in the chat, give a comment. Maybe she'll watch it afterwards. Oh, this is tough to get off. Yeah, that's a good phantom to find. That's what I love about this show is kind of like my thesis is sort of like, even when I'm not looking for phantoms, they happen to find me, you know? Like I'm just watching TV and Yellow Jackets or whatever I'm watching, and it just comes up out of nowhere. Did you see Yellow Jackets?
I've not seen Yellow Jackets yet.
Oh, well, did I spoil something for you? There's some phantom in there.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so there's something to... I think I'm just making lots of white noise here, but how cool are these? Go get your Becky Laugh Phantom of the Opera graphic novel. Part 1, Part 2 is in the works. Where have I seen a phantom recently? I live in New York City, so I'm kind of always surrounded near the city. So I'm always kind of around the phantom. How do you feel about the Phantom closing on Broadway?
I'm very sad to hear it. Not only is it a cultural landmark in New York, but for so many talented cast and crew members who've been
Yeah.
involved with the show for so long, I can imagine it's heartbreaking.
Yes, for all you Broadway people, it's the time to get me that backstage pass to Phantom because it's not going to be there much longer. So, yeah, just throwing that out there too. I never thought I'd have a time crunch for this, but like I always wanted to have a backstage tour of the Phantom on Broadway. I've only been going to see it since I was 11, so come on, guys.
Fingers crossed for you.
I'll put you on the show. We'll talk all about it, you know. That's about all I can offer, but I think that's a pretty good deal. What is your history with monsters and Universal monsters and acting as a monster? You're an actor and a monster person. How do you describe yourself?
That is a great way to describe me. I would describe myself as an actor, a lifelong monster kid, and now thankfully a professional creature performer. I am based in Los Angeles, so I'm very fortunate to get to work with a lot of productions, including the official Universal Monsters brand from time to time. My Universal Monsters journey began when I was very young, and I found a copy of Edward Edelson's Great Monsters of the Movies for 75 cents at a used bookstore. And opening those pages as a very young child and looking at Lon Chaney Sr. as the Phantom and Nosferatu, Max Schreck, definitely left an impression on me that has now become part of my line of work. So there's not a day that goes by that I don't have monsters somewhere in my world, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Have you ever played the Phantom?
I have not yet played the Phantom.
Is that one of your dream roles?
That is one of my dream roles in some capacity. I know there are many interpretations of the story that have yet to be presented. So
yeah, would you like to portray a classic Phantom, or would you like to create your own Phantom character?
Ooh, that is a good question. At this point, I'm open to all options of playing the Phantom, or generally any characters in the Phantom lore. I think it's such a specific type of character that
I could see you as a Raoul too. There's less makeup, maybe, but you know.
Thank you. Yes, I'm far less comfortable when I'm not wearing excessive makeup, as you can probably assume. I need to be buried in latex and silicone, or I'm not performing.
Gotcha. Chessie says hi and wants me to tell you this joke. What kind of music does a mummy listen to? Rap music.
Oh, classic. Good. Very good, Chessie. Thank you. I do love a good Halloween.
And on theme. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, very on theme.
Again, if you're out there watching, got some questions, throw them in the chat. We'll just have a nice little conversation. Okay, let's see. I gotta just tell the audience, this is my confession. If you've watched my channel, you probably know this already, but I'm a terrible monster person because like as much as I am always been a fan of Phantom and horror and monsters in general. And look, I got all my classic monster toys up here, you know, and my stamps and all that stuff. I've always loved it, but I feel like I've seen these movies through pop culture and not really through the screen. So it was my goal last year, at the end of last year. I saved this for Halloween time. I was like, 30 movies in 30 days. I could do that. Definitely not. I'm way too busy. But I tried, and I think within 3 or so months, I got through them all. The Universal Classic Monsters Blu-ray complete 30 film collection. I just did them all in chronological order for the most part. And yeah, I don't think I'd seen most of these movies at least all the way through properly. But watching Dracula, it's like you know every line just from pop culture. And Frankenstein, it's like you know these films even if you've never seen them before.
Yes, that's part of the enduring legacy of these characters and the original films particularly, is that we've come to know them, yet many generations probably haven't seen the original film. And that's why I appreciate that box sets like that one exist.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. I'm going to do it with quality. And maybe next year I'll do it with commentary. Because there's a lot of bonus stuff on here that I was just like, one day. I mean, I think I had seen all the Phantom stuff because I had this Blu-ray, you know, on its own previously. Do you have a favorite monster or one that what was your first monster, you know?
My first monster, let's see. Well, when it came to classic black and white monster movies, King Kong is the first one I remember seeing. And I know it sounds cliche, but seeing the visual of King Kong on the Empire State Building on my tiny television I had when I was a kid was still as striking as seeing it on the big screen. And shortly thereafter were Frankenstein and the Mummy. So 2 Boris Karloff classics.
Gotcha. You know, speaking of Boris Karloff, I guess we're just gonna skip around. This is how my brain is operating tonight. So, I mean, you said you're not quite the expert on this version of Phantom of the Opera, but
It's true.
do you know that there was supposed to be a sequel to it?
Ooh, do tell.
Yeah, they did greenlight a sequel called The Climax. And it was supposed to have all the original people back, and I think in its development, you know, Claude Rains got busy and blah blah blah. The script got a little changed, so The Climax did come out a couple of years later, but it was not officially a Phantom of the Opera sequel, and the starring role went to Boris Karloff.
Interesting.
So I think the only way to get it on DVD is on this Boris Karloff collection. And of course, they used a lot of the same sets. I'm sure they were using stage 28, you know.
Well,
and actually,
that's a great fact I had not heard before. Thank you for that.
yeah. I haven't watched The Climax in many years, so I can't speak to it as much. I watched Phantom of the Opera last night. I did do that one with commentary because I have seen that plenty of times.
It actually calls to mind a book I have here. I'm gonna get this from my little shelf. It is by John LeMay. It's called Classic Monsters Unmade. And this has a whole wealth. Well, specifically, this is volume 1, 1899 to 1955. And there are all sorts of gems in here, including a couple other Phantom sequel ideas and information about the lost German Phantom of the Opera film as well. So highly recommended. Classic Monsters Unmade.
Wow. I have some more questions about that book coming up, but I figure you want to watch the trailer for The Climax?
Sure, let's do that.
Yeah, because that's like, I don't know, they should have put that on the box set as like a bonus feature or something. That Phantom Blu-ray, it's a little sparse.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have the classic Lon Chaney on it. I don't know why they didn't just throw that on as an extra feature, but hey, whatever, Universal, do your thing. That's got to be stage 28, right?
Here, in the midst of gaiety and splendor, lurks a monster of psychological horror. A fiend whose murderous conscience is haunted by a voice from the past. A voice tormenting him to the point of madness.
Rest, my dear, gently slipping away into another world. A world of my design, where you will be helpless without me. Tonight you give your voice and your will to me.
Starring the lovely songbird of Phantom of the Opera, Susanna Foster. The terrorizing star of Arsenic and Old Lace, Boris Karloff. And a romantic new star, acclaimed for his role in Dragon Seed, Turan Bey. With June Vincent, George Dolens, Gail Sondergaard, Thomas Gomez, Jane Farrar, Ludwig Stossel, and ballet and chorus of 100.
I was so worried about you, I forgot to tell you how wonderful you were.
Hold me tight. Please hold me tight. Franz, I'm afraid.
I've come to help you, my dear. You don't want to sing, do you?
Dr. Honert, don't look at me like that.
Very fascinating, because
right?
it's evidently inspired by Phantom of the
It
Opera.
was definitely originally a Phantom of the Opera sequel. Yeah.
Yes. Now I'm curious if that's mentioned here in the book. It may
Yeah.
be, because
Well, it
several of the
did get made
films.
though, so that's the difference.
Well, that's the thing. There are several things in here that were made but had significant changes
Hmm.
throughout the. Here it is. Yes, in fact, there are 4 pages dedicated to the climax in this book. Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Yes. Fascinating. I hadn't
I'm
gotten to that
wondering, when
yet.
did that book come out?
This is from, let's see, 2021.
Oh, so that's really recent. I was
Yes.
gonna say I did watch, like I said, the Phantom of the Opera 1940s version last night, but with commentary, just to get a little extra insight on that one. And I couldn't tell you offhand who the film historian's name was, but he also mentioned a couple unmade Phantom of the Operas throughout the years that I was like, how does he have access to this A, information, and B, he seems to have even read the scripts for them. So
Mm-hmm.
like, where are these laying around Universal or whoever?
Did he mention the Phantom Swordsman?
No, what's
The
the
Phantom
Phantom
Swordsman
Swordsman? I
is
don't think
definitely
so.
mentioned in this book as well. When all of the rage was stage combat in films, and they decided that there was going to be a Phantom sequel where the Phantom is now a master swordsman, and it would essentially be a showcase film for fight choreography.
And around what era would that be? And which Phantom would it be a sequel to?
Let's find out,
Yeah.
shall we? The Phantom Swordsman was developed 1924, so beginning
Oh,
to be
wow.
developed before the Chaney film was released.
Right.
The contents of the full storyline aren't known, just bits and pieces of it as presented in Philip Riley's book dedicated to the history of 25's Phantom. That's another excellent book.
I wonder if I have that one.
Oh yes, that I have that right here, in fact.
Yeah, if you show it, I can tell you if I have it in my
Yes,
in my
this is
lair behind me. Oh yeah, the one that has the full script in it and everything.
the full script,
Yeah,
lots of
yeah,
newspaper excerpts.
yeah.
Yes.
I do have that. Yeah, that's a wonderful piece of
Oh,
thing that I never finished. But one
yes.
day I'm like, I'm gonna read this whole thing.
It's definitely a goal of mine to make it through all of Philip J. Riley's Universal Monsters books. I mean, several of the shooting scripts and the unmade scripts he's published are just really incredible pieces of history.
Yeah, that's coming in several years, a review of that book here on my shelf. He did mention, well, one thing he mentioned was that Boris Karloff was apparently supposed to be in development in a Phantom film in the 30s. So in the decade between Chaney and Rains. I wonder how far that went, who was developing it, what it would have been like. Is there a script? He said there was another script in 1957 that was going to be set in Italy, and one in the 1990s by Wolfgang Petersen. I wrote that down so I could look it up later, in Nazi-occupied France, where I guess this was sort of in the years of like the war movies, so they were leaning into that genre. And I guess in one of these, I forget which one, the Phantom's disfigurements come from the war, and how it's kind of like made him a monster on the inside, I guess.
Interesting interpretation.
I'm getting some of these facts a little mixed up because, you know, they were all laid out very quickly on this commentary at one time. It may have been the Boris Karloff one, which in similar fashion to the Claude Rains, the actor didn't want to go through all of the makeup that they're used to going through for their monsters. So like in Claude Rains, but it was very minimal. And I think he said in the Boris Karloff version, she was going to take his mask off and discover that he's not disfigured at all, but it's all internal. So how about that,
twist.
Boris Karloff?
Wow, fascinating. Honestly,
Yeah.
not a bad idea.
It is. It hasn't been done yet.
That's true. Well,
On
Charles
all,
Dance, as you
yeah,
know, we never see his face.
that's true. That's true. Although she does faint from it, so
Yes, there must
must
be
be pretty
something.
terrible.
Yes.
I forget if they show it in the original. I'm gonna get the names wrong. Copit and that movie was originally a musical. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yetsin and Copit. Yeah,
Mm.
they had a Phantom of the Opera before Andrew Lloyd Webber, I
Oh,
believe.
yes. Yes, as did
So
Ken Hill, I believe was
yeah,
his name.
and Ken
Yes.
Hill was another
Yes.
one. Yeah, and because Andrew Lloyd Webber's came out around the same time. I think Andrew Lloyd Webber was inspired by Ken Hill's, and then he went to write his own. But at the same time, this one was in development and maybe even released, but not as, not as big as Andrew Lloyd Webber can do it. So that kind of overshadowed the entire project, and they rewrote it into the miniseries for TV, but without all the songs in it.
Interesting.
And I believe the original cast recording of it features the Phantom is the guy who sings Gaston in Beauty and the Beast.
That's a great choice.
So yeah, he's got a big voice. So.
Yes. Now, am I thinking of the right one? Is this the musical just called Phantom?
Yes. Yeah, I believe it's just called Phantom.
Now, I could be wrong about this. I hope I'm not getting my facts mixed up. But there was one day I decided to Google if Kristen Chenoweth had ever been involved with anything Phantom of the Opera, because it feels like it could suit her well. And she had been, if I recall correctly, involved with one of the different adaptations, not the Weber version, but it was either Phantom or the Ken Hill musical.
Let's find out.
Yes.
Who? Okay, this name does sound familiar, but who is Kristen Chenoweth?
Kristen Chenoweth is a fabulous musical theater performer and operatic vocal talent who is very well known for her ability to hit high notes, quite the soprano, and a very good fit for the Phantom lore.
Let's see. Wicked's Chenoweth and Phantom film to be featured on A&E. No, I don't think that's it.
Perhaps I was mistaken then. But the other musical adaptations are quite interesting to look into. Obviously, they're all quite different from one another. And the Charles Dance miniseries is one of my favorite adaptations, so I'd be very curious to see that as the full musical.
Yeah, it's out there. It's actually pretty popular. It's probably like second to Andrew Lloyd Webber in popularity of Phantom musicals, I guess. I think they do it a lot. I think there's a film of it touring right now. I keep missing it because they do these random screenings in New York of a, I want to say Chinese cast or Japanese cast, and maybe one of these like boy band stars in it.
Now, there are so many musicals. Let's just backtrack a second.
So this is Phantom, I think the Yapik. Let me just grab my CD here and make sure I get this right.
And there's also the Phantom musical, which was presented in Asia, that was an adaptation of Susan Kay's story.
Right, that is a different one.
Okay.
Excuse me while I flip through my crap here. But good that I see. I'm gonna make a mess, and that's kind of what this show is all about. Okay, so I got my Ken Hill right here.
Wonderful.
And that was the one that inspired, I believe, Andrew Lloyd Webber. And this was all the music in this is classical music with new lyrics over it.
Yes.
So he was like, screw that, I'm gonna write my own music, This is Phantom.
There we go, yes.
By Maury Yeston and Arthur Copit. And so this is the original, I guess the original cast recording, the American musical sensation premiere cast recording. This came out in 1993, although I think it was written years before that. So you can see that he kind of has that same aesthetic as the movie.
Yes. I find
And
it fascinating how it's
yeah.
almost mockbuster advertising to refer to one that is not Weber's as the American musical sensation.
Yeah, I think he beat them to the production of it, so they kind of were like
Ride the
scrambling. I don't
coattails.
know.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess that too.
Well,
Do
in my
whatever you
opinion,
can.
there's room for all adaptations.
Oh, trust me, I have a whole closet for it. And then this, I believe, is what you were talking about with the
Yes.
adaptation of the Susan Kay novel. And I have to admit, I still haven't watched this. And the reason I haven't watched this is because I have never finished the Susan Kay novel. I've started it like 5 times, and this is going to be a very unpopular opinion, but I hate it. I can't get through it. I
It
don't
is different.
understand it.
Admittedly, it is different, but certainly a unique interpretation.
I
Just
need to do it just so I can like talk about it, even,
sure.
you know, and I don't want to. I do want to watch this. Of course, this is 2 different plays. It's like a part 1 and a part 2 by 2
Yes.
different casts. So this has 4 different full productions. And I went through hoops to get this shipped to me from wherever it came from.
I was gonna say I've had some difficulty finding a region-free home media for that. So congratulations.
I am so glad. I don't know how it happened. It was pretty shady, and I'm pretty sure I was gonna get scammed through it, but it appeared, and I have it, and it's waiting for my review here on this channel in several
Well, you
years.
can't not watch it after all that.
Yeah, it's like my fandom collection. It's like almost like if I can't find a Phantom, I know there's one waiting for me to discover, even that I already have, because there's so much stuff that I just haven't even dove into yet. But when I see it, I'm like, I need to have this, because like a lot of collectible things disappear very quickly or become very expensive very quickly, you know, if you don't jump on it. So I
Yes,
try.
that's very much the situation I've been in with the Universal Monsters paperbacks from the early 2000s and
Oh,
late 1990s. There are about 10 books that were published in a very specific chronological sequence. You've got The Devil's Night, The Devil's Brood, Return of the Wolf Man, all in a mini
so
series
these
of
are like
sorts.
new stories based on the
Yes.
movies?
Yes.
Huh.
And Return of the Wolfman in particular was the hardest to find and now the most pricey in the collectible world. But I have acquired each one of those expanded universe Universal Monsters novels. Now it comes down to finding the time to read all of them.
Right, exactly. The same with books, like that book you were just showing. Like,
Yes.
I've looked through it and it's fascinating, and I've read parts of it, you know, in pieces, but I never like sat down with that script and was like, I'm going to read
Yes.
this tonight, you
Yes.
know, and
Finding
I'm
the
sure it's
time is
fascinating.
difficult, but always a rewarding experience when it's a piece of history you enjoy learning about.
Totally. Yeah, and if anyone's watching who wants to talk about any of these different versions, who is like maybe a big fan or an expert on it, that'll make me do it. So reach out, and we'll, you know, maybe I'll watch 4 non-English Phantom musicals, you know. Did you like the Susan Kay novel? Are you a fan of it?
I did. As I mentioned, it is different, particularly when it starts to entwine with the elements of the classic story.
Okay, I
Is when
never got to that point.
yeah, that's when it becomes a bit of an acquired taste. I think her
Hmm.
writing style is very easy to read. I think she definitely understands how to write the familiar characters that we've come to know in other adaptations. But admittedly, it is different. I embrace it as its own story.
Sure.
But yeah, like as I mentioned, when it starts to overlap is when the conflicts start to,
Hmm.
for those
See,
of
I
us who
didn't
are
even
very
get to that
familiar.
part. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
I'm never gonna get through this book. Can somebody read it to me, please?
Well, if you would watch the DVDs that you would have the whole story.
I know, but I want to read it first, because they're not in English, so I'm not even going to
That's true.
understand what's going on necessarily.
That's true.
So I
I
want a
will also.
context to it.
That's true. Well, I will say that Susan Kay's novel has some of my favorite Phantom artwork of any adaptation. Like the
Oh.
inside cover of the paperback edition is just extraordinary.
Hmm.
So bonus points for that.
Maybe I'll grab it in a few minutes. Let me see if I can find that new Phantom that I'm talking about. trailer. Well, I do. Let's jump back into the 20s. I do see that Phantom mask next to you. Can you tell me
Yes,
about that?
absolutely. So
Because
this
that
is
is a little like people don't see that version of the mask very often.
Certainly not. Yeah, this is a replica of Lon Chaney's 1920s Phantom of the Opera mask. This particular replica was made by Longshore Masks, who many fans will know is one of the top makers of Phantom of the Opera replica masks. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Jasper Anderson, who is an artist for Trick or Treat Studios, is about to release his own interpretation of the Chaney Phantom mask, and it looks quite good from what he's been sharing on Instagram. But this is a Longshore Masks replica.
That's great. Is that commercially available or?
Yes,
It
he
is
sells them through his website and also through Etsy as well.
very cool.
This
I
was a
did.
treat to myself after one of my gigs about a year ago. I said, you know, there is a Universal Monsters prop replica that I've always wanted to have in a museum-like setting, and that's the one that started it all, Lon Chaney Sr. So here it
Yeah,
is.
people, you know, I see that half mask. That's what people associate most with the Phantom, I'd say these days. But that
Yes.
cool Lon Chaney mask, you know,
Oh yeah. It has
people
an
need to see
uncanny
more of
valley
that.
feature to it. You know, it is one of the creepier Phantom masks, and that's one reason I've always liked it, because if you were to see this face in the dark, it looks enough like a human face that you would be fooled until he steps into the light and you're like, oh, hey, whoa.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And what's funny about, oh, I guess that version and the original story that it refers to is that he only wears the mask for her. Really, he just runs around without it most of the time. You know, in the first chapter of the book, you see him like several times, like just running around, being part of the crowd, talking at the dinner table. Like,
Yes.
maybe he's got one of those false noses on that he talks about later on. But here, I brought up this trailer. Let's check it out.
슬픈 노래 이 무대에 펼쳐진 알 수 없는 이 미스테리 내 사랑 내 아픔도 눈물이 되어 내 심장을 적시네 영혼까지 바쳐 이룬 사랑
Well,
Seems like
that looks
they ripped off a
fantastic.
couple Andrew Lloyd Webber things in there.
Well, there's also some things I noticed that definitely bring back the Charles Dance series to mind, like The Garden.
Yeah, that's the original musical for that.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to have to catch that in theaters. I was not aware that was circulating. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Me too. I don't know if I'm going to catch it, but hopefully they'll release it on Blu-ray or whatever.
Well,
at
good
some
timing
point.
with the announcement of the Weber musical closing on Broadway to bring in other adaptations of Phantom to
Right?
fill the
Yes.
void, so to speak.
I know. I wonder, have you seen all right, let's talk about Weber. I know you've seen it several times in different productions, right?
Yes, I've seen it on Broadway twice.
Okay. And is that where you
Oh,
are
yes,
here?
this is actually the Venetian Theater in Las Vegas,
Oh,
which was
yeah,
built.
right.
Yes,
So
this was built for Phantom, the Las Vegas Spectacular, but I saw Sarah Brightman in concert in this venue.
Oh, wow. So this wasn't the Phantom show, it was the Sarah Brightman's concert?
Correct.
Is that no, that's Broadway, right?
This is Broadway, yes.
Yeah. Wow. I was lucky enough to see, God, which anniversary was it? 30th anniversary a couple years ago before the pandemic. I got lucky and got some cheap tickets that they were offering through their Instagram or whatever.
Wonderful.
And Andrew was there and Hal Prince was there before he passed away, and Sarah Brightman sang at the end. It was pretty cool.
Absolutely. What a special occasion.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm trying to go see it at least one more time before it closes. But if that's the last one, like that's a pretty good one to go out on.
Certainly, yes.
What
Yes.
was? Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
I was gonna ask about the Sarah Brightman show. How was it?
Yes, it was wonderful. It was definitely a once in a lifetime experience to see her in a venue associated with Phantom, though she wasn't performing the Phantom show at the
Right.
time. It was, I believe it was called the Starlight Symphony. And interestingly enough, in Las Vegas, most shows have to be 90 minutes. There is a particular regulation about that for some sorts of shows, but her show was quite long, had an intermission, and it spanned the history of her whole career. So not just Phantom, but also many of her other mainstream hits.
Oh yeah, well, I have a question.
Yes.
Let's see if I have it on hand somewhere. Oh wait, I gotta full screen you for a second. So, did she do any Phantom songs in the show?
She did, yes. She sang the title song, Phantom of the Opera, and she had a special guest whose name unfortunately escapes me, but he was a male opera singer, and he also sang Music of the Night. And they did a sort of a riff on track day from the Weber musical and Masquerade. So it was quite well represented, especially because it was in that theater.
You'd think so, yeah, hopefully.
Yes.
Did she do, which one should I show? I Lost My Heart to a Starship Trooper.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Do you know about this?
I am not familiar with that
Sarah
album.
Brightman and the Starship Troopers.
Oh my goodness gracious. No, what a great piece of another era.
Oh my God. This is like, see, this is why I have to have a Phantom show to talk about all my weird Phantom related stuff. That's just,
please take the
thing
floor.
about the thing, I guess, and this is true for all the movie versions and basically any adaptation ever of Phantom of the Opera, is they're all pretty seriously flawed, but the fascination kind of comes from how each one is uniquely flawed or just strange, or like in this case, this isn't directly Phantom related, this is pre-Phantom, but it's Sarah Brightman related, which makes it Phantom related, because come on, you can't think about her in her career without Phantom of the Opera and Andrew Lloyd Webber, of course. Certainly. Right? Sarah Brightman and Hot Gossip. Oh my God, let me introduce you to something strange. You've never seen this? Oh, you're gonna love it. And let me see, while I'm pulling this up, is on Broadway, that's the only time you saw the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical? Did you ever see any of the touring productions?
No, and from what most people say, I have seen the superior production with the Broadway staging.
Right.
Not superior to mean the performers or the production, of course, but the as originally presented.
Right. Have you seen Love Never Dies?
I have seen the recording of Love Never Dies, yes, the DVD.
You have opinions about that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, good. Fair enough. They should, I don't know, maybe they shouldn't, maybe they should just get rid of that. I was gonna say, wouldn't it be interesting if that opened up in the Phantom Theater in Broadway, just
well, it would be unexpected.
Do it, right?
I have a castmate in my current show who explained that for her musical theater major in school, they had all been tasked with writing essentially a dissertation on a musical. And in order to throw everyone's expectation, she wrote it on Love Never Dies.
And what did she write about it?
That's what I would love to know. I asked her if I could have a copy because I would love to read this. And she's in the process of finding it for me. So, Deanna, nice. The clock is ticking. Let's read it.
Yeah, I'd like to read this as well. Maybe she can come on the show and talk about it. Is she a fan of it, or is she,
Interestingly enough, she did present it from a very unbiased opinion of this is the show, not from a perspective of being a big fan of the Webber original show. It was more so like, this is the show, here is why it's controversial, here are the positive sides of the show, and you make your own decision from there.
So it's very scientific.
Very, very journalistic, yes.
Journalistic, yeah. I mean, again, like that's another example of just how bizarre things can get. And in that case, how large scale these strange things can be at times.
Yes.
They're not just low budget productions that are weird. These are like giant millionaire productions, you know.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
I mean, I have my opinions on it, but I do like the music. I think the story is to be desired, perhaps, but it is fascinating on its own. Like, why does this exist? And why do they not show his face in it?
Yes, it definitely it creates a lot of questions.
Yeah.
But
Those are
in my
just
opinion,
two off the
it's-
top of my head.
Yeah, yes, I have a few very important questions about it as well. Yes.
Okay, I gotta show you this video.
Yes, please do.
Let me transport you back in time to the 70s. 1978. So I guess I'm thinking Phantom started being developed in 1984-ish.
You're the best thing that I've ever discovered. Flash gardens left me, it's gone to the stars.
A product of its time, for sure.
Tell me, Captain Strange, do you feel my devotion? Or are you like a droid, devoid of emotion? Encounters 1 and 2 are not enough for me. What my body needs is ghosts and kind of 3. I lost my heart to a starship trooper, crashing line in hyperspace. Fighting for the Federation, hand in hand we'll conquer space. Listen, Strange, what's our destination?
I mean, you get the point.
Well, I have
Sarah,
to say, I
bring
feel
back hot
mildly-
gossip.
Well, I'm cheated that she didn't perform that in
I
Vegas.
know. Vegas would be a great place for this song.
This is true. This is a fact. Wow, what a fascinating product of its time. Most definitely, it's a lot of fun.
It's definitely fun. That's why I had to own it.
I'm
And
glad
there's
you
another
did.
one called Lost in Space, I guess. There's another video like this, but this is like the big one.
Oh, 70s science fiction is just great.
I mean, come on, Andrew. This can be marketable. Bring back disco, you know. Rock it up a little bit.
Combine this
I
with
would watch
Starlight
this.
Express.
Right? Oh my god. How come there's no Starlight Express movie?
Oh, that's a great question. Something else we need at this point in time to really take us back to a simpler time.
Yeah. I mean, Cats, it just didn't quite work out.
No,
so-
that did not translate.
Although I do have to admit, like my classic monster movies, which we're gonna have to get back to at some point. I'm like way sidetracked from that, but having a lot of fun doing so. Where was I going with this? Cats musical. Andrew Lloyd Webber. Oh man, I lost it.
Have you seen the 2019 Cats film?
Of course, yeah.
Just checking.
It's like, well, I find it fascinating for its own reasons.
Yes.
Oh,
and
that's what I was gonna say.
Shanks was wonderful in the film, by the way. Skimble Shanks was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't all bad. It just was kind of like maybe they should finish it before releasing it kind of deal.
Yeah, and almost a moot point film, in my opinion, because I personally feel one of the things.
What a cast!
Yes, exactly. They are a very talented cast, but the live show, it really soars because of the sheer stamina and talent of the cast on stage. And when you make that computer generated imagery instead, there's something that
Yikes. Have you seen Cats in the theater?
Live? Yes, I have.
My cat story is that I mean, I saw it when I was a kid on Broadway, I liked it, but the thing that's most memorable to me is, and I gotta paint this picture for anyone who hasn't seen it. Throughout the show, if you look around the theater, there's like cats like doing stuff all over the place. Like they're just like part of the decoration, you know, like you look over here, there's like cats lying on the wall and stuff, you know? So at the beginning of the show, when the lights go out, they all come running through the audience with these like flashing lights. And the first time the light flashed was right in front of my face. Like they were literally running this close to me when the first flash went off, and it just like freaked me the fuck out. But like I was like, what is happening, you know? And it's a very immersive experience. Yeah.
It's really interesting you should mention that, because generally everyone who I talk to who saw the production as a kid has the same memory of seeing them in the aisles and throughout the theater. And ironically, it is also my first memory of seeing it when I was a kid. I've seen it as an adult and as a kid was seeing them with the light up elements in the audience.
Yeah. I know I have the VHS over there somewhere.
Yes. That is a film adaptation of Cats.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's way better. Go watch that. Let's get back to some classic Universal monster talk, because I do have a list of things to talk about. Where's my box set? I have my shit all over the place. Excuse me. Okay. My first question is, were these scary for the time period?
Absolutely.
And
go ahead.
Maybe were the first ones more scary than the last ones, you know?
Yeah, that is a great two-part question, and is a two-part answer. At the time that these films were beginning to be made, special effects makeup, as you know, was not as widely seen as it is today in popular culture. You had people like Lon Chaney Sr. pioneering the game, and of course, Jack Pierce and Millicent Patrick. So when these creatures appeared in the general pop culture landscape for essentially the first time, it was unlike anything audiences have seen before. And we have to remember that the audiences of the early 1930s would get frightened if a train got too close to the screen in a film, you know, so they were terrifying. But to address the second part of your question, as Universal Monsters became a more common presence in cinema, I don't necessarily want to say audiences got bored, but the trends...
Desensitized.
Desensitized is a great word, and trends of what were box office hits were changing. So you'll notice as the Universal Monsters legacy goes on, you start to have the crossovers with Abbott and Costello, and of course the original multiverse of the monsters crossing over to make the films more marketable. So there are many people who say that they became less scary as time went on, whether that's because of the films themselves or because of the audiences. But I personally think Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is my favorite Universal Monsters film. So that's a matter of personal opinion.
Well, let's go straight to there.
Yes,
tell me,
please.
Okay, well, first of all, I don't really know the history of Abbott and Costello. I mean, I just kind of know them on the surface. I know who's on first, of course, right?
Yes.
That was them. How I don't know. Just tell me, can you give me a general history of them and where they were when they started making these movies, crossover movies?
Absolutely. So Abbott and Costello started as a vaudeville act. They'd been performing together in the live entertainment field and touring for quite some time, and later became, you know, television and film stars. So when Universal came calling to have them appear in several of their films, Universal was coincidentally at that time looking for a way to bring the monsters back into the marketable realm. So they said, why don't we combine these two things that are very popular for us? We have our stars, Abbott and Costello, and we have our other stars, the Universal Monsters. And there are various reports that not everyone on the creative team and not everybody in that starring cast was happy with the script or the fact that they were crossing over two things that don't inherently go together. But it must have been a success in someone's eyes, because after Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, they went on to have several other monster crossover films that followed.
Why is it your favorite?
Yeah. Well, in my personal history with monsters, I've always had a sort of campier, fun presence. Their presence was more Halloween associated in my life than gothic horror. And that's where most Universal Monsters scholars will debate about the film, is they're not a gothic horror vibe by that point. They are a little bit more Halloween-y in spirit. And the reason it's my personal favorite is because the monsters are all played by legendary actors in the film together. Bela Lugosi's second and final appearance as Dracula. You've got Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman, Glenn Strange as the Frankenstein monster. It's sort of a best of everything you could want with a fun Halloween vibe to the monsters in one film, and they don't play the monsters for laughs. Abbott and Costello do the comedy, the monsters get to play it straight. So it's honestly a great combination in my opinion.
Do you think they were all consistently as good as Meets Frankenstein, or?
Well, you know, that's a great question. As time went on, the originality of having those two worlds collide did seem to wear off a little bit. But hey, Boris Karloff is great. And of course, The Mummy is great as well. And there was a crossover with The Creature from the Black Lagoon as well. And that's just too unique to have any negative thoughts about. That was on a television special. But yeah, the original Meets Frankenstein is still my personal favorite because of the cast.
It was a fresh idea at the time.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
It was entirely a fresh idea.
So I did notice, I mean, is this, I don't know, again, like their history of film before this, but they're called Abbott and Costello Meet whoever, but they don't play them. They're always playing other characters.
Yes.
Is that a thing that they've always done throughout their movies? And even at the end of Meets Frankenstein, when they tease the Invisible Man crossover, we get to that movie and they're also playing different characters again.
Yeah, yes.
So what's the story there?
A good way to look at that, in my opinion, is they are extended comedy sketches like you might see on Saturday Night Live, where even though you have celebrity actors, for example, Bill Hader for many years or Kenan Thompson, they're always playing different characters. And so, yes, to your point, they do meet the Invisible Man as their characters from Meet Frankenstein, but almost, I guess, in the American Horror Story sort of way, they're just stepping into these separate worlds as comedy stars playing characters.
Yeah, I was gonna compare that to like when a comedian has a TV show and it's like the so-and-so show. I mean, the obvious one, which I don't want to say, but the Cosby Show, you know, right? The classic. It's like that's not even his name in the show.
Or the Wayans brothers.
Right, yeah. And Kenan probably too, I think, had a show recently. I don't remember if he played himself exactly or not, but it seems to be a theme in these kind of productions.
Exactly. And so even though Abbott and Costello were looked at with historical significance now, because they were very historically significant, at the time it was no different than these comedians who had their own shows, and this was just another way to market them.
Got you. Since we're on the theme of Abbott and Costello, I want to propose an idea.
Yes.
And maybe, you know, 60-second pitch. What would be Abbott and Costello meets the Phantom of the Opera?
You've asked the right person. I've already thought about this. So
I knew it.
Abbott and Costello meet the Phantom of the Opera. Things are astray at the Paris Opera House, so they call in two famous chandelier repairmen to help them out with this little dilemma they've been having. Well, Abbott and Costello play the chandelier repairmen, and as they're there, they end up in the midst of interfering with the opera ghost's plans. And then they suspect they are the opera ghost, and they have to prove that they are not, until a final showdown proves that they can single-handedly take down the Phantom.
Wow. That seemed rehearsed and everything. You've been waiting like how many years to put that out into the world?
No one has ever asked me until today, and that's why I'm very glad I'm here.
I am the right person for this. Yeah, that's great. Universal, get on it. Let's revive. You know, maybe they need a new comedy duo for the modern times, but you know, they don't make comedy like that anymore.
That's true.
It's very rare to have like that kind of like sketch kind of, I don't know what you would call it, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
That classic duo, Three Stooges kind of comedy.
Yes. And when you think about it, it's sort of cut from the same cloth as the way the Universal Monsters films were made. And I know that's kind of a hot take, as they say, but Lee Whannell once said that comedy and horror are very similar and that they're both about a build-up and a payoff. So when you consider how directly that style of comedy will be set up, punchline. And in the same way, the monsters are creep, scare.
Yeah. No, it's the same beats. It's totally true. That's why comedy and horror work so well together.
Yes.
You know, if the script is right, of course, but in
Yes.
theory. Well, okay, great. Hollywood, get on it. Okay, Dracula. Have you seen Spanish Dracula?
I have seen Spanish Dracula, yes.
Yeah, that was fun. That was actually the last one I watched. I was like, I'm gonna watch this box set and then I'm gonna reward myself with Spanish Dracula.
Very good.
I forget the actor's name, but I almost feel like he was as good, if not better, Dracula than Bela Lugosi.
Absolutely. It's a magnificent production. And just the fact that they went through such lengths to film at night when the English speaking crew had wrapped
Yeah.
to film on the same sets, like
And
that
with
is
shorter
truly
time
wonderful.
periods of filming, I believe, too.
Yeah.
Shorter time to do it.
Oh yeah. And that's a level of accessibility in cinema that I wish we would see more of. And I really applaud them for doing that. At that point in Hollywood, that especially feels groundbreaking. So it is a miraculous production that we've preserved. And interestingly enough, there was a production I had worked on at one point where my director had been related to one of the very key members of making Spanish Dracula. So that was fun to hear some stories.
That's cool. Did he have any insight that was interesting?
He did. Unfortunately, most of it slips my memory at the moment. But if you know, I'll get you in touch with him and he can talk about it.
That'd be cool. What else was I going to ask about that? Oh yeah, I mean, were these, for the most part, I mean, I guess the main ones may be a little different than like the B ones here, but were these large? Obviously, Phantom was, but how big of a budget were these movies compared to an average movie of the time period?
Well, after the success of Dracula, there was a lot riding on the Monsters brand, as it were, at the time, the feel of the Gothic horror films. There is a very fascinating novel I just talked about on my podcast called It's Alive, was the name of the novel.
Yeah, I heard that, yeah.
And that went into a bit of the history of how much was riding on making a big budget film that ended up being Frankenstein, and how much controversy there was around whether or not to invest so much in making another large-scale monster movie. So as both of those films became successes, these were the equivalent of blockbusters at the time.
Right. And just to clarify, that novel that you're speaking of, it's like a historical fiction, right?
Yes, a very thoroughly researched historical fiction that uses a lot of snippets of what was in the news at the time to sort of fill in the gaps of what was happening when Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff were being interchangeably cast as a Frankenstein monster.
Do you have a favorite monster?
The obvious answer is the Phantom.
Lon Chaney's Phantom.
Lon Chaney Sr.'s Phantom, yes, was one of the first ones I recall seeing as a child. If I had to pick a second favorite monster, I'm going to say the Mummy. Yeah.
Why the Mummy? And some of those sequels were a little hard to get through, I gotta say.
Yes, the Mummy, I suppose the Mummy is somewhat of an unpopular opinion because the franchise hasn't necessarily held up as well as some of the others, but I've always been an Egyptology person ever since I was very young. So the aesthetic of the Mummy films has always been very appealing to me. And then of course the various interpretations of the character. But I also recall having a figure of the Mummy as a kid, and it was,
that's the reason right there.
That's the reason. It always ties back to nostalgia and
toys.
Toys. Yes. Well, as you mentioned earlier, so many of us know Universal monsters from their pop culture impact rather than the films itself.
Let me grab something. Let's see if I can do this without making a mess. There you go.
Ah, there we go.
That's the Invisible Man.
That's the Invisible Man.
I'm sorry, I wanted to grab the Mummy.
Bandages. Easy
I
mistake.
saw the bandages and I went straight for it. Well, since I got a Claude Rains in my hand, how do you? Okay, we got to talk a little bit about the Claude Rains version.
Sure.
That, like most Phantoms, has a sordid history that maybe has affected the final production. What do you think?
Yes. More so, the thing that I always can't get off the top of my mind when it comes to the Claude Rains Phantom is the fact that even though it wasn't intentionally produced this way, it has sort of, yes, there we go. Classic Karloff movie. The Claude Rains Phantom has sort of been used for erasure of the Chaney version. And I know that wasn't the intention, but utilizing the same sets and almost in a way that makes you question what was wrong with the Chaney version. Did it have to be remade? And then they made
I
it
guess
so
that
wildly different.
That it didn't have sound or color, I suppose.
At the time was considered a detriment, yes.
Yeah, and why was Phantom of the Opera the only of the classic monsters in color?
Yes, well, it wasn't going to be the only one. There was a script that, once again, stand by.
Yes, tell me. Yes, okay, we got to go back to that book too. I got to hear about these lost Phantom movies.
This is actually a script that is mentioned in that book. This is The Wolfman versus Dracula, another script which was published by Philip J. Riley, the same publisher of the Phantom book. This was intended to be Universal's first Technicolor Universal Monsters film, and the draft of this script is dated, first draft is dated May 29th, 1944.
Okay, that's the year Phantom came out, I believe.
Yes, so this was intended to be the first one outside of Phantom that would continue the Technicolor trend, as it were.
I know people love this Phantom for its own reasons, and at the time it was, I'm sure, a color spectacular. People hadn't really seen color yet, you know, or it was brand new, right? But from what I heard, like, the script changed a lot. You know, the original script would have been like a 3-hour movie, and they cut out a whole subplot about him being Christine's father, and that's why their relationship in the movie is so kind of strange, because they don't necessarily address that. And then then it's played for like, is he like attracted to this young 18-year-old girl, and then it gets creepy, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense, and there's 2 love interests, and I don't know, it's kind of a mess.
It's one of the more convoluted adaptations, to be sure. Hence, not my favorite.
Shot very beautifully.
Beautiful
but
film.
The script is like, what is happening here, and why?
Yeah.
Who made these decisions? And I mean, I could say this similarly for the 1920s version, where it's like, why did you cut out the graveyard scene? Why did you change the ending? Why is he like riding this carriage at the, you know?
That was a great imitation of the end of the film.
Right, it is.
Exactly how it goes.
Yeah. And then, like, of course, my favorite factoid of how they messed this up is when he's holding his hand up, you know, and he lets it go, and it's supposed to be her veil from her wedding dress, but apparently they lost the footage and used a rehearsal take where he's holding nothing. How do you mess that up? Chaney was pissed.
It does change the interpretation of the ending, though. You could say, as I've said before, you could interpret that ending as he still has such a grip of fear over the citizens of Paris that when he threatens them with an object, they believed it, and he gets the last laugh.
It's just that they messed up again. They reshot it and still messed it up.
Yep.
I have, you know, geez, is there other, I don't know. Maybe this is a good time to look in your book and talk about that early German Phantom that's lost.
Sure. Yes.
Because
let's do
that is one thing that's like a fascination to, I'm sure, most Phantom fans, is the things that we can't have.
Yes.
You know, like, I want to see the original version of that movie with the graveyard scene and all that stuff in it. Like, it sounds like the superior version, but audiences were just not ready for it because they didn't, like, it was like probably the first horror movie any of those people had ever seen.
Yes.
And it was a little too intense.
1917, so most certainly, yes. Alternate title, The Ghost in the Opera House. They have, how many pages here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 pages dedicated to the to the German film. Yes.
Maybe just the highlights if you see any interesting.
Yes. Let's see.
Is there any photos?
I see. Here we go. There are no photos beyond a poster that appears to have been a teaser poster.
Not very interesting.
So we had not particularly. 1917. Remember.
Yeah.
So it says here, what follows is a rough translation of the synopsis as taken from a 1916 issue of the Austrian trade publication Payman's Film Listen number 19. Fantastic drama with Aud Egednissen. I do apologize for butchering that name. During the construction of an opera house, its designer had installed various mechanical and technological contrivances that ensured he could secretly access the rooms in the cellar. One day, illness prevents the diva from appearing as Gretchen in Faust, and the designer, in the guise of an old regular visitor to the opera known by the name Phantom, recommends an ingenue to the director to take her place. A recommendation the director accepts. The ingenue's appearance proves a success, only for her to then find herself held captive in the underground rooms by the ugly Phantom who is in love with her. She is rescued by her fiancé and a Persian, while the master builder meets with his death. The subject matter is good, and the photography, acting, and sets, very good.
Oh, it sounds awesome.
It does. And also points for including the Persian.
Points for the Persian, points for Faust, you know, anytime they get any of these details right, I have to applaud it.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know why people change the Faust thing all the time. It's so obvious. I guess rights is an issue. Well, like, I didn't even catch this, but thanks for the film historian commentary for the you know what? It's funny. I also never think about this movie in terms of who directed it, so I never even say his name. Lubin? Did I say that? Arthur Lubin. Everyone calls it the Claude Rains Phantom, but we should be calling it the Lubin Phantom, really.
This is true. We can't discredit the directors.
Yeah, I didn't even know his name until yesterday, which is just like, I can't believe I didn't know the director's name of this movie. Anyways, the end scene where, you know, Christine is a success in the opera house. She is backstage, and it is implied by her costume and hairpiece that her assistant is carrying that she had just finished Marguerite and Faust, but because they didn't want to pay for the music, they didn't actually show it on stage. So anyone who's in the know would recognize that detail, at least at that time period.
Yes.
So they did get it right eventually, but they didn't want to pay for the actual music, I guess. Yeah, Claude Rains, why? I don't know. I feel like I'm on a former question about Claude Rains. Tell me about Claude Rains. What brings to your brain, and why was he a good or a bad Phantom?
Claude Rains is an exceptional, almost melodramatic actor. I'm sure some people would come at me for describing him that way, but his style of such intense performance works well for the Phantom, in my opinion. But his most legendary Universal Monsters performance is, of course, the Invisible Man.
Yeah, he's definitely. I do prefer him in this role. You know.
Yes,
although
I agree.
I'm not as much of a Invisible Man. I mean, I haven't read the original source material, so I don't know how it compares, but it seems more apt to him. Okay, here's a question. In general of the classic monster movies, tell me about the emerging technologies and how they were used, and in particular, I'm sure nobody had ever seen anything like this before, right?
Absolutely. The Invisible Man was a game changer in its field, as most of the films at the time were. I mean, even if we are taking it back to something as simple as the transformation of the Wolfman and the frame by frame, like the techniques they employed in these films, particularly with the Invisible Man, but also with many of the others, were just absolutely unheard of in the general public eye at the time. And if something as simple as special effects makeup was a shock, I can only imagine how these tricks of editing and camera work and lighting, you know, even something as simple as the lighting and color theory in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's just that there's certain tricks that are still so ingenious, and they get a lot of credit for that.
That one's not in this box set, unfortunately. So I've never actually seen that. Yeah. Who stars in Jekyll and Hyde? Anyone famous?
The name slips me at the moment.
Yeah, so not one of the like main monster people that we know of.
Not to my recollection, but definitely look into the sequence of the transforming face that they achieved through lighting and color theory. Just really exceptional.
So I want to say a few things about the Invisible Man franchise.
Yes.
Although a lot of these movies kind of just like mix together. I can't say I gave them like the full 100% attention all of the time. So some of the details kind of get combined in my mind, but I don't know. How do you feel like that franchise developed, and I don't know. I just want to point out the fact that in the original, he talks about how it's not, you know, like digestion and things like that, like would showcase the person. But it seems like all that goes out the window for all the other movies. And how come, except for the one, I believe is the Invisible Woman, right? Is that what it's called?
The Invisible Woman, Invisible Agent. Yep.
Right. I think except for that one, nobody's really addressing the elephant in the room that there's like a naked man running around all the time. And it's just very strange to me that everyone's just super casual about like a naked person is just like sitting next to them driving a car or whatever they're doing. It's just like, what is happening and how come this is not addressed? I don't know if you have an answer for that, but
well, I think The Invisible Man is a very clever film. It is the original Invisible Man is a great technological feat, and perhaps not remembered for much more than Claude Rains' exceptional performance and the technological feats. I don't think anyone's been looking into the story quite as much. But I will say,
especially.
Yes, I will say, similar to you, I've not paid the closest attention to the Invisible Man franchise as some of the other ones. But I will say I felt the recent remake of The Invisible Man is one of the most ingenious ways to remake the Universal Monsters franchise. It was terrifying, it was disturbing, and it was completely different, yet true to the IP. So I think they did a great job with that.
Yeah, I need to look into that. I admit I haven't seen that one yet. Who's in that again? Anyone?
Elizabeth Moss is the star.
Oh, okay. Was that part of the Dark Universe?
Officially, I don't believe it was. I believe
I didn't think so either.
I believe the only film released under the Dark Universe banner was The Mummy.
Right, and I didn't see that either. Can you speak to the Dark Universe franchise at all? And at least, what is it? Is it dead in the water, or are they still trying to do this somehow?
From the public information we have, it does not seem the Dark Universe branding is going to move forward. The Invisible Man, I believe, was Blumhouse. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But probably. I know Lee Wanell wrote it, who's exceptional. But I don't believe it was officially part of the Dark Universe in the same way that Renfield is not part of the Dark Universe.
I was going to bring that up too. Yeah, did you see the trailer for Renfield?
I did see the trailer for Renfield.
How do you feel about that?
I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think
it
to
does
go
look
back
like
to
it's
what
a
we
lot
were
of
saying
fun.
earlier, the comedy and horror combine very well here, especially in the era of the popularity of What We Do in the Shadows. I feel that the
that show was great, and movie.
Agreed. As for the Dark Universe, the concept was fairly straightforward and actually fairly solid, in my opinion, that the Dark Universe would be formed around an agency that hunts monsters and would therefore involve all of these characters in a sort of gotta catch them all way. The Tom Cruise Mummy film created a very interesting pop-up at the Hollywood and Highland shopping district here in Los Angeles, where they built a giant sarcophagus that covered like 5 stories of a building. And they additionally had an escape room that I participated in that was themed around the new monster hunting agency and the tomb. So they did
What was your role?
I actually did not act in it. I participated as a guest.
Gotcha.
But I would have liked to have worked on that particular one as perhaps an agent of the monster hunting agency. But it was fun to see the monsters back in the mainstream for a while. I can understand why it doesn't seem to have moved forward, and the action-based approach wasn't my favorite, but I thought the seeds of storytelling were there.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, what did you think of it? Because I don't have an opinion yet. I need to catch up. I'm sorry, my monster people out there.
That's all right. You covered the classics first. You can start there. Now you can get to the remakes.
Yeah, and similarly, although of a different era as well now, what did you think of the Brendan Fraser Mummy series? Also, I've never seen any of them.
No.
Maybe I've seen the first one. Hey, I'm an Encino man. I like that one.
Okay, I'll give you that.
That's my Brendan Fraser, and
understandable. No, he's great. What an icon, and also what a comeback. The Mummy.
You know, he was in that DC show like a couple years ago.
That's true.
Nobody really seemed to like give him credit for that, which I also haven't seen. But I know it's like I did hear his name recently. It's not like he's been that disappeared, you know.
Sure, he's back with the
The
Whale
Whale,
now.
yeah.
Yeah, quite a bit of critical acclaim. The Mummy franchise, led up by Brendan Fraser, is a lot of fun, and
Okay.
in the general public consciousness, and also in some film scholar opinions, The Mummy is probably the most successful remake of the classic films because it combined the fun with the horror and didn't try to directly replicate what the original had done, and yet still worked very well on its own. And obviously the Mummy franchise in the 2000s was integral to bringing these characters back into the themed entertainment realm. There's rides based on those, and there were mazes, and then the Mummy's success led to Van Helsing, and there was, you know, the Mummy franchise was solid and still holds up in that world.
So you would recommend going back to watch it. And
Definitely.
the Scorpion King, that's part of it too, right?
Yes, the Scorpion King was a spin-off of that franchise. Unfortunately, Scorpion King starts to lose a bit of traction as they've made more and more direct-to-video films. But just personal opinion, yeah, the Mummy and the Mummy Returns are extremely substantial on their own.
Awesome. I want to go back to the technology of the old films.
Yes.
I have questions about Bride of Frankenstein and what is up with these little people in these glass cases and why is that relevant at all? And was that just a flex of this is what we can do in our technology at the time?
Dr. Pretorius's experiments, yes.
Because I don't, I don't get it at all.
Yes. You know, there's certain things that perhaps those who are experts in the particular films can explain in more detail than I am. And I'm sure there is a Bride of Frankenstein scholar out there, but from the way I've read it, it just kind of seems like a flex.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like to me. I was like, because I'm watching this from a perspective of modern day, even though, you know, I know just it's an interesting way to watch these films. Like if I were a kid today, what would I think of this compared to what's out there now?
Yes.
And like Dracula's, you know, bat on a string, I was just kind of like, this is kind of funny. I don't think it's supposed to be funny, but now it is. And those little people in the cases who seem to be very self-aware and okay that they are miniature people. I don't know, were they grown? Were they born small and they just developed into these there was like a pope or something? Like I don't know. It's just there's a lot of questions. I'm not just necessarily asking you, but anyone out there, I'm just throwing those out into the world. What is happening?
Yes.
It was totally irrelevant to the story. It seems like, you know. I just had to throw that out there. Okay, there was I don't remember which movie this is in, but it was in one of the sequels where somebody is reading the novel Dracula. So were they trying to make these meta in some way? Because does the novel Dracula exist in the Universal Monsters universe?
Oh, there was absolutely an attempt to make them meta. Obviously, you have Elsa Lanchester as Mary Shelley writing Frankenstein. You know, there are certain elements they've included here to sort of, you know, poke at the real life history of how these stories were created. And it is ironic, isn't it? Even when you consider the later sequels with the Professor Lampini's traveling circus having Dracula as as an attraction in his sideshow. Even though in that world it would make sense, it is almost funny that in the world of these films, Dracula became a pop culture phenomena.
And I have a question about maybe just the time period in general, but were scientists rich at some point? Because they seem to all have these gigantic castles and like limitless equipment. And even if they're fired from their job, they can still continue with their experiments. And like, I feel like scientists are not paid quite that well, at least in modern day worlds.
It's interesting how in some of these films, maybe I'm thinking of the Paul Naschy films from Spain, but I know there's at least one film where the investors of the projects are mentioned. And yes, they are investing in our monster science project. Yes, they funded our equipment here. Like, and the investors will always be somebody potentially shady.
They seem to be all living in a castle for some reason,
yes.
Not like a flat, you know.
Well, where else do you expect to house all that large equipment than a castle?
Right.
Yes.
So again, just throwing that out there. Just like things that I thought about while watching 30 movies in the past few months.
To piggyback on that, have you seen Assignment Terror yet?
No, what's that?
Assignment Terror. So this is a
Should I
whole
pull
other
it up?
road.
Should I pull up a trailer or something?
Are you yet familiar with the name Paul Naschy?
I don't think so.
Pull up the trailer. Paul Naschy, Assignment Terror. So while you do that, I will. I'll give a brief history. Paul Naschy is I believe he's from Spain. He was a
Assignment
monster.
what? Sorry.
Assignment Terror.
Terror. Gotcha.
Assignment
Sorry, go ahead.
Terror. Yes, Assignment Terror. He was a monster fan who was a fan of the Universal monster films and essentially said, I'm going to make my own monster movies, and they're good. You've got all of the El Hombre Lobo, werewolf movies he made, Waldemar Daninsky, and Assignment Terror is a monster crossover. Let's see here. It is that is correct. The top one at the top there. That'll be the right one. Yes.
So this is from the 1970.
Yes.
And where was these from? What?
Spain.
Spain. Okay. So I'd say like the Hammer horror was in full effect around this time, I'm sure too, right?
Yes. So this is a crossover film that features a lot of the most famous monster characters and alien scientists who attempt to resurrect them. So not only are they rich scientists, they are aliens who attempt to resurrect monsters to end mankind. And there's also dancing because
there's go-go dancers.
Oh yes.
Nice.
It has everything you could possibly want in a monster film. And it's also one of my favorite monster films. It's just so absurd and fun.
I'm totally sold. Because
these are the aliens here, the alien scientists.
I do love my B horror and exploitation genres as well, They don't really cross over into my Phantom world very often, but oh, it's pretty good makeup. Have you ever played the Wolfman? You have, right?
I have played the Wolfman, yes.
Yeah, I want to get to your pictures at some point too. Have you played Frankenstein?
I have not yet played Frankenstein. Possibly too short for that one. That's okay.
Right, yeah, that's fair. And was this a series of films or just one?
There are a series of films that Paul Naschy was involved with, starring Waldemar Daninsky, who was his version of Larry Talbot. But this is a standalone film. You get the idea. It's the cheesiest crossover you could come up with, and my God, is it a lot of fun.
I will seek this out. I wonder if it's on Amazon Prime or anything.
And with no spoilers, I'll say The Mummy has like the most insane death in this film. Like it completely one-ups any other mummy death scene in the Universal monster films. Like it just next level crazy stunt death in this film.
Speaking of deaths, that was actually my next note here, is that one thing I found pretty silly about all these movies was like there's a big ending and then the monster dies and then immediately the film is just over. There's no aftercare. It's just like dead, done.
Yeah.
What was up with that?
Yeah, what was up with that? I suppose at the time, if the audiences were so frightened by these characters, it was a sense of relief to see that the monster had died, and now we can go home happy.
Yeah, I guess so. I just found that interesting. It was just like there was sort of a formula to them at some point where it's just like,
oh, absolutely.
You know.
And also, quick note, in case you do seek this one out, I believe it appears under the name Dracula versus Frankenstein sometimes, but that is not the same as this Dracula versus Frankenstein. There is a different Dracula versus Frankenstein, different film.
And which one is that?
This one, this is a whole thing. This is an Al Adamson film. This is one of the,
I know that name, yeah.
Yes, one of the most absurd films you will ever see in the monster genre, but also a lot of fun. Lon Chaney Jr., ironically, is in that film as a henchman to a mad scientist. Some of the worst makeup you'll see in the classic monster lore, but that's why it's so fun. And their Dracula looks like Frankenfurter from Rocky Horror. You can't go wrong.
Yeah, I like that.
Lots of fun. Yeah.
Speaking of, that was another note I had. The sidekicks. What's up with the sidekicks and why are they always hunchbacks and why do they need to be there at all? And I guess it's not relevant to the Phantom films here, but in the Hammer film, they kind of adopted that sidekick where he's like living with some guy in the basement of the, like it's just weird and like unnecessary.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, part of me thinks that society was very ableist at the time, and anyone who was different, obviously, this applies very well to the Phantom story. Anyone
Yeah.
who appeared different than the normal physically abled person, such as a hunchback or any sort of like sideshow type, was considered an outcast or a weird person. And so every one of these movies did tend to have a hunchback character
Yeah.
because at the time that was considered strange, and they always needed something equivalent to a sideshow. That's at least the way I've
Right.
seen it.
Although I did very much enjoy Igor from, I can't remember which sequel it is, but I'm sure you could probably help me
Bela
out here.
Lugosi as Igor.
Yeah, Son of Frankenstein,
Oh yeah,
or
classic.
is that the one? Yeah, I think that might have been my favorite.
Oh, he's terrific. Yeah. Well, especially compared to Fritz. I mean, Fritz being the original sidekick, we all know Igor in the public consciousness, and that is
Yeah.
quite a good performance, I will say.
Yeah, trading it up because he's not playing the other monster this time. It's
Yes.
confusing how much they change character throughout the films.
Oh yeah.
And why they did that is another question, but hey. I think it worked out. I think that was my favorite. Oh yeah. And here's another one. I'm sure, again, I'm asking these questions that I'm sure you don't have official answers to, but it seemed like in the Frankenstein franchise, he was getting smarter and he could talk to an extent, and then he just got real dumb again.
Yep.
What's up with that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Very inconsistent.
Every actor who played Frankenstein monster brought something different to the table, shall we say. And I was speaking with a guest on my show, Mark Voger, who has written excellent monster material, who pointed out that him and Julian David Stone, the author of It's Alive, had mentioned how Glenn Strange and Bela Lugosi have actually defined a lot of the characteristics we see now. And it's Lugosi who brings the that we think of for Frankenstein. Although
yeah,
he
that didn't
reached the
come
point
until
of
later
speaking.
movies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's another thing I noticed. Most of the early monsters just kind of go like this or like this, and then like that's kind of like what they do. I don't know. That's pretty much all that they do.
Well,
like
that's
the
where
Mummy
Claude
and
Rains-
Dracula are just like, blah, yeah. It's very just hand motions and like imagination, I suppose.
Yes, well, that's where I think actors like Claude Rains do come in to be assets to these productions, is that, you've got that very intense voice and it will give you something entirely different than just using physicality. Though, big shout out to Lon Chaney Sr. for knowing how to emphasize use of hands as the Phantom when he's dropping the notes and then sort of like really.
Oh, yeah. Well, he was on another world with that stuff because he grew up with deaf parents and learned sign language, and that's how he communicated through his body anyways, so it was perfect for the role.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if that translated as well into his son, but before I forget, Assignment Terror, is there a Phantom in it?
There is not a Phantom in Assignment Terror.
Didn't think so. I figured I would know about it if there was.
I know.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. My other questions. Oh yeah, so the creature.
Yes.
Was that like almost an exploitation movie, in terms of their franchises? Like, was that risque at the time? Because there was women in bathing suits and like, very overt sexuality.
Yeah, that is an interpretation of it. I could see being a reasonable one, certainly. Although ironic that the creature was designed by a woman, obviously Millicent Patrick, a great story. And the way they had pitched her at the time, rather than the talent behind the creature, it was the beauty who created the beast. It was very almost like seductive portraits of her creating the creature, but yeah, that's an interesting interpretation of that. And at the end of the day,
again, I just don't know like the zeitgeist of the time. Was that like risque at the time, or were they trying to push that? Because I know in Phantom they had to reshoot or re-edit things that had too much cleavage in it in the 1944, so skip a couple years.
Yeah, there are people who know the Creature franchise like the back of their hand, who may
Yeah.
be able to speak more to that. I think Creature, more than really any of the other characters in the Universal Monsters legacy, is more remembered by his place in pop culture than the film itself.
Right.
Unfortunately, I think there are far fewer people who have seen any of the Creature films than people who know just the look of the character.
Sure. Yeah, and credit to that guy in the suit. Apparently, he was holding his breath for like 4 minutes at a time, going
Just
under.
incredible. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
that's pretty cool.
Even like,
Um,
even as a Creature performer, I can say that's next level what they were doing
yeah,
back
yeah,
then.
that's a lot to ask for.
Oh
And
yeah.
with all that stuff on, I'm sure it wasn't easy.
No.
The thing that, unfortunately to me, the thing that I remember most about the Creature franchise is the gross overuse of the theme song.
Dun,
Like,
dun,
especially in
dun.
the sequels, it's just like every 2 minutes that music came on, I was like, "Oh my
Oh
god, we
yeah.
get it already."
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I'll agree with that. Yeah. If you ever get the chance to see Creature in 3D, though, I highly recommend
Oh,
that.
yeah, that is a feature on here that I did not
Yes.
that's something I have to revisit.
I was very fortunate to see the Creature on the big screen in 3D. The
Oh,
Academy, when
cool.
Universal celebrated 100 years, they had released a series of monster films in theater in the Academy Theater.
That's actually good that you brought that up. I believe it's happening right now at the Chinese theater. They're doing a Universal movies kind of thing and with
That
some famous
was
people, and I'm very jealous because I believe Bill Moseley is introducing Phantom of the Opera,
I
and he's in
believe you're
my
thinking.
documentary. I hung out with him.
Oh,
He's a great dude,
oh,
yeah.
he's always been really nice. Yeah, that I believe that was the Famous Monsters Film Fest. That was last weekend.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, did you attend at all or
No, I was working.
yeah. Yeah, I wanted that. There was like a popcorn bag with Lon Chaney as the Phantom on it. I really wanted,
Nice.
but of course I live
Yeah.
here in New York, so there's no way that's gonna happen.
Mm.
I think I'm almost done with my classic monster questions. Oh, here's not a question, but something that was interesting that was pointed out in the commentary of the Phantom is when he's walking down in the 40s version, when he's walking down the staircase to his lair, I guess. It's supposed to look exactly like the Queen in Snow White
Ah,
down her staircase. It was
I can see
designed
that.
like that. So I do want to do a comparison of that, but I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that is
Um,
interesting, and I could see that. Yeah.
so let's talk about you a little bit. What is your history in being a monster actor, and what monsters have you portrayed?
Well, I'm very fortunate to have grown up in Southern California where the Halloween haunted attraction game is very strong. And so I grew up hearing about Not Scary Farm and Halloween
Mhm.
Horror Nights at Universal and Fright Fest at Six Flags and the Queen Mary Shipwreck at the time, all sorts of events happening all around me. And at a young age, I started to pursue internet content when that was brand new, internet content related to Halloween events and documentaries from Haunted Media, DVD Magazine. Fast forward a few years, learning about all these productions behind the scenes, I started working as a scare actor at Halloween events and have now gone on to, this is Los Angeles Haunted Hayride. This one is Flashback Video. So I've done a lot of,
There's your Wolfman, right?
that is the Wolfman. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
at Universal and Universal Monsters Legends Collide. I believe there's also a mummy on this page as well. These are, yes, Brides of Dracula. I'm in the
That's
center.
pretty scary.
There's the mummy. Yep, that's all.
Is
These
this
are
like
all.
what's your average time to get into makeup for for any of these roles?
Depends on the role. The Wolfman one was 90 minutes, and you had to get it done in 90
Wow.
minutes because it was, for Halloween Horror Nights, it was a live event. You got to get it done on time. This was
One
for
whole
the
Vegas show.
Yeah, exactly. One whole. That was a great callback, my friend.
Yeah,
Yeah.
callback.
So all sorts of. Long story short, I worked at a lot of events, and now I've continued to do a lot of IP-based entertainment, movies and TV show tie-ins in LA, and now I'm actually working in the film industry and television as a creature and a monster as well. But it all started with these live Halloween events, which I admired so much as a kid, and now it's my line of work in television and film as well.
What are you in anything at the moment? I know when we started talking about this, you were doing the Stranger Things.
Yeah,
And how
I
has that
do.
been?
I do currently work at the Stranger Things Experience. Ironically, that's not a creature job. I'm
Right.
an improvisational actor there, but
Okay.
I'm very fortunate to be part of that cast. That's
What exactly is your role? How does that work? And
well,
is it
here's the
fun? Is it like, God, that must be a lot to turn on to improv every day.
it's actually something that I personally really love. I of
That's
course
good.
really enjoy scripted content, but any sort of immersive experience, which is a lot of what I do, immersive entertainment, a lot of these experiences are akin to what I grew up with as a kid. And all you have to do is remember that feeling of being young and having a character speak with you as though you're in the same world they're in. Imagine, for example, Kevin, that you were to be, you know, much younger and the Phantom came and spoke to you and it took you inside the opera house. That would certainly be, you know, a very memorable experience.
Right.
So
Yeah.
to remember that feeling of having a character that you've only seen on screen, you know, reach out to you and bring you into their world is a lot of why I do what I do. And I'm grateful for those events.
Have you had any exceptional scares that I don't know, have people really, have you freaked anybody out? Like,
Let's specifically address that question in the Universal Monsters
Sure.
attractions, because I think the answer is yes. And something that I greatly applaud Universal Studios Parks and Resorts for doing at this point in time. Universal Creative is really doing a lot with the Universal Monsters brand, with brand new stories for these characters, such as The Bride of Frankenstein Lives, Universal Monsters Legends Collide, all sorts of new, fresh takes on these characters. And to be playing these characters, the Bride of Dracula, the Mummy, I was Renfield for one night, and Wolfman, you know, playing all of these characters who are so familiar to me and to us monster people, seeing the reactions of guests viscerally frightened by these characters to this day, especially the Brides of Dracula, you know, to be playing a character that was invented over 100 years ago in some cases, and still watching people be afraid of these new interpretations of them just shows you how the legacy of these characters truly will never die.
Nice. Do you have a favorite non-Lon Chaney strange Phantom of the Opera version, or like any other, you know, versions of that are notable to you, either for good reasons or bad reasons?
Are we talking about adaptations as a whole or the character itself?
That's a good question. Maybe both. How would you interpret each of those questions?
Okay, yeah, the answer is yes. I'll actually pull out an adaptation right here on my shelf that I've always quite enjoyed. This illustrated edition.
Oh, I have that. Yeah.
This is a really remarkable.
Yeah, I'll full screen it so you can
yes,
showcase it.
Greg Hildebrandt. Yes, let's showcase a little bit of this. There is a foreword by Sarah Brightman, ironically, who wrote the foreword to this book. This is one of my favorite adaptations in the illustrations, at least. It is the original text. This particular illustration is one of my favorites in the book. Just really such beautiful use of light and color. Lots of red and gold, and just really an exceptional adaptation. This would probably be my favorite choice. Yeah, this one.
Yeah, I got mine in hardcover and softcover.
Oh, nicely done.
Yeah,
Very good.
I think one of them I just found randomly at the Strand in New York City.
Nice.
Like, I just always have to go to the fandom section to see what's there.
Yeah, that's how I am with the Iliad bookshop in North Hollywood. And also another wonderful illustration, again, the red and gold are just so brilliantly.
I love, these are just
another
so
exceptional
great.
piece. Yes. Yeah, this adaptation is the one that I discovered fairly young that really stuck out in my mind as like how the property looks and feels in my mind.
Oh yeah, totally. And what about like a movie, or like, you know, a bizarre like movie version, or do you have any? What do you think of the Robert Englund? Have you seen that one?
Yeah, there are all sorts of interpretations, whether we're talking Argento or Robert
Oh
Englund.
boy, yeah.
Yeah,
that's a whole can of rats.
Actually, glad you asked. Have you heard of The Phantom of Hollywood?
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. I think I've got that right here also. The Phantom of Hollywood. Another very strange adaptation.
Yeah,
do we have the
yes,
we do. Yeah. There it is. There we go. Yep. Yeah.
I haven't seen this in a while.
This
is
is
the one where he's running around the lots.
That is correct. Yes. Yeah. And it's a very sad film because at the time they were filming this, they were genuinely demolishing the back
lot.
Right.
Yeah. And it was kind of like, this movie is sort of like a preservation of what it was.
Absolutely.
And then there's a story apparently too.
Right.
But it's really just a lot of B-roll of like the lots getting destroyed.
Yes, and it's a very sad watch for that reason. You watch it, you're like, oof, especially because in Los Angeles, things do change very rapidly. And so to see that happening to Hollywood history is always a bummer. But it is worth a watch.
That's an interesting question that I just good you brought this up. Being that you live in the area, did you ever get to visit the Phantom set,
Yes,
28 stage?
I
And what
did.
was that like? Because man, I'm so jealous of you now, right now.
That was really a marvelous experience to be in there, even just for the few moments that I was in there. The
What was the
scale,
context in which you got to visit it?
it was with a crew member on a production at the time, and so the stage was generally empty. You know, we were permitted to be in the area for a production, and the stage was open, so to
Wow.
just sneak a peek inside was really quite wonderful. And it was, when I think back on it, the thing that stood out to me, especially as someone who works on the Universal lot a lot, and I've gotten to see most of that back lot through production opportunities like that, it was really stepping into another era. And you can walk through any of those stages on the lot, and I'm sure I've been through more than half of the sound stages on the lot on various projects. And when you step into a set that was built 100 years ago,
Yeah, and it
it
still
was.
stands up. I mean, it must have been technologically tough to film modern productions there, right?
Yeah, well, they
Probably wasn't
integrated the
built for
sets
that.
into some films, and yeah,
Of course.
I'm sure you're aware it was demolished some time ago,
Mhm.
and they had mentioned they plan to preserve it, and I don't believe that has happened
Yeah, I
personally.
don't think so. I haven't
Uh,
heard anything about that.
yeah, and like watching the stage get demolished a couple years later, you're like, oh, they're not really taking pieces out of there, are they? It just seems like they're just, yeah.
Yeah.
But Super Nintendo World is now open on the plot, and the Super
Oh,
Nintendo World
okay.
is I know lots of people working on that, and I'm
Cool.
very proud of them. But it is a bummer to see such a significant piece of film history, which such artistry put into it, go away.
Do you have any favorite uses of that lot outside of Phantom movies? It was also used in
Oh yeah.
Dracula, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. I have that lot, or that set specifically, because I have an
Oh,
answer for
what's the
why.
difference exactly? What
Well,
else is on that lot?
many things which
Okay.
have appeared in many films, which I love. Something that I always found fun is the stage 28 was also the Grinch's lair, I believe.
I
And
never. Oh,
so
wow.
just
Okay.
like right
I
behind.
want to do a show about that and just show all the different movies that it's been in. But
Yes.
that's like a whole task that I haven't had the time to compile.
Understandable.
Yeah.
My personal favorite use of the Universal backlot in a film is there is a film from the early 2000s called Big Fat Liar with Frankie Muniz and Amanda Bynes that sort of idolizes and puts the Universal backlot on such a pedestal that I immediately fell in love with the lot, and the fact that I've continued to work there in many capacities over the years is something I'm extremely grateful for.
Did they use that stage in particular in that movie?
They did not, but to
Mm.
tie back to what you were saying earlier, they were filming The Scorpion King at the time they filmed Big Fat Liar. So a lot of the sets from Scorpion King and the Mummy franchise appear in Big Fat
Interesting.
Liar.
Huh. Interesting. Should we get to the big reveal?
I think we should.
I think it's about that time.
It
You
is
have some
exciting.
news. I did not know
do.
about this going into this, and I'm very excited to hear anything that you're allowed to
Absolutely.
divulge.
So within the next couple of months, at the time of this recording, the world should be seeing what was a collaborative effort from the USC School of Cinematic Arts, a master's project that was a feature-length Phantom film with a brand new original script, brand new story. Yes, Faust is in it. Yes, they perform Faust in the movie. And this new feature-length adaptation of Phantom that is set to be released is something I am very fortunate to say I worked on. I did voiceovers for the new film. So at the time that it hits general release, be sure to keep your ears peeled, and you may just hear me as many of the inhabitants of the opera in the new adaptation called The Phantom.
Wow. Well, I have so many questions. I don't know if you are allowed to answer them.
We'll talk about it when the film comes
Yeah,
out.
yeah. Like, can you reveal anything about who's making it or who's in it or
The Phantom and Christine are in it. I can say that much.
That's fair. Okay, I'm very excited about this, and whoever's involved with this, you're gonna have to get me in touch so they can be on the show. Maybe we can get you and them on, at the same time or something like that. Is it
It's a
gonna be a
wonderful team.
theatrical release or is it
We will have to wait and see.
Right.
Generally, in most situations, when it is a student project, even through through USC, the last project in the same program was a film called Voodoo Macbeth, and that just received wide release. So we're very happy about that, and knowing that this is utilizing the same program and a lot of the same leadership team, I have my fingers crossed, and I'm going to knock wood that the Phantom also receives wide release.
Have you seen the final product, or?
I have seen large chunks of the final product, and I am pleased.
Great. That wow. See, that's the bombshell. I should have teased that at the beginning, but surprise. That was gonna be my next question, is like, do you know anything else on the horizon, or is there any plans that you've heard of Universal reviving Phantom of the Opera? I know it was going to be way down into the dark universe, but that seems to be scrapped now. Do you know anything about what that movie would have been, and if there's any plans to revive it, or even as like a scare attraction? Have you ever heard of any rumblings about a Phantom plot,
Well, I'm certainly hoping that there is more use for the Phantom character in the haunted attraction themed entertainment world. I'm not familiar with what the film would have been for the dark universe, because it was too far down the line from what was announced. But I will say this much: in 2018 and 2019 in Orlando, respectively, the Universal Monsters attraction that really kicked off this new wave of Universal Monsters stories at Halloween Horror Nights did feature the Phantom. The Phantom was in the maze in Hollywood, and there was a scare zone, an outdoor haunted attraction tied to it that was a crossover between the Phantom and the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and it was a masquerade, a monster masquerade, and so that was as recent as 2018. So here's hoping that if Universal continues to produce attractions for the Universal Monsters brand down the line, that they will continue to utilize the Phantom in future attractions.
Were they based on existing designs of the Phantom, or was it redesigned, new interpretation?
All of the characters have been redesigned interpretations in the new attractions, and it was quite similar to what we've come to know and love, but not tied to one particular actor's likeness. The thing that was most striking to me was they had Red Death on stilts. That was pretty cool.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I have one last question for you.
Yes, sir.
Tell me about this piece of art that I'm staring at of the Phantom behind you.
Yes, an excellent piece of artwork. This was made for a model kit. It was Polar Lights model kit. This was the box art. It was a limited edition of 250. I have here number 7. The artist did sign it. I should know the name offhand. I apologize that I don't. It is kind of tough to read the signature.
Yeah, and similar for my awesome shirt here. I'm sorry, I don't remember who printed this, but
it appears to be Chris White is the artist signature here, but it's one of my favorite pieces because, similar to the Greg Hildebrandt book we were talking about earlier, it utilizes gold and light, and it has exactly the kind of color scheme that I've come to expect and love in the Phantom lore. So that's one of my favorite pieces.
Do you have any cool Phantom toys?
Do I have any Phantom toys?
Yes.
No, I have mostly stuck to large-scale replicas, or I have behind me here a letter from the Broadway flea market. This was stage used in the Broadway production.
Oh, cool. One of the notes?
Yes.
That's
so
cool.
Though I don't have any toys, I like to have larger pieces that seem as though they could have come right from the world of any particular IP. And as a collector of props and prop replicas, the Phantom has been quite a prosperous one for that, with such beautiful pieces of art.
It's not there anymore, unfortunately. It just closed down recently. But had you ever been to the California Institute of Abnormal Arts? CIA?
I did go. Yeah.
And did you? Because I actually played there once, many years ago, in a band, and the what's his name, Carl Crew, who owned it, was an actor. He played. He was in a movie called Blood Diner. You know Blood Diner?
Of course I know.
Oh, okay. Oh, so maybe I should end this with my documentary trailer. I don't know if you've seen it. I'm making a documentary about Dookie Flyswatter. He was in a shock rock band in LA in like the late 80s and early 90s that kind of got overshadowed by lots of other bands that did get popular.
Interesting.
And he was also a B-movie actor and writer. He wrote Blood Diner. Yeah, and he was in a lot of these like bad movies in the 80s, like Surf Nazis Must Die, and that kind of ilk.
Oh yeah.
And anyways, Carl Crew, who owns CIA, was one of the lead actors in Blood Diner. But I didn't even know this until he pointed it out when I went there to interview him there for my documentary, that the soundboard was cased in a replica of Box 5 from Stage 28.
Wonderful. Very
So
cool.
that was just like, oh my God, how did I miss this?
Yeah.
And did you know that was there, and did you see it?
Unfortunately, I had not yet seen any of the Phantom stuff as I went to, believe it or not, this is a very bizarre story, I know, but I have a very cool and unconventional story of how I ended up there. I was 8 years old, and yes, and Elvira was performing at a charity event that they were holding there. And my very cool mother, who's always had a pulse on all the things Halloween, pop culture, said, when you finish school today, we're going to go to this club to see Elvira. Someday you will thank me. And she was absolutely right.
Incredible. What did she do there? Did she perform at all? Or was it just kind of like a meet and greet?
She did perform. She hosted a live auction. She did a whole slew of stuff. And as we were leaving, it was because we had left a little early. It was a school night.
Yeah.
You know.
Did you see like all his weird sideshow attraction stuff?
You bet I did.
Yeah.
And as an 8-year-old kid who loved Halloween, it was amazing. And so as we're leaving through this hallway and leaving the venue, we ran into Elvira, and I got a picture with her, which you can find on my Instagram. And that's one of my treasured belongings, is a picture of us out front of the CIA.
That's incredible. Yeah, I played there with a band called the Radioactive Chicken Heads.
That's a great band name, especially for that place.
Theatrics and people in masks playing rock and roll. You should go see the Chicken Heads. They're still around. They play LA often. It was also, I don't know if you know anything about green jelly.
Nope.
Okay, that's a whole nother world that you can explore on your own. Actually, okay, so I want to show you my trailer and get your reaction to it.
Yes, let's see
and
it.
then we'll end it with that. And if you're a casual Phantom viewer, this may be a little bit more risque than you are used to. So just trigger warning everything. This is about a shock performer, so just putting that out there.
To be discussion about the importance of danger, chaos, the possibility of something happening that really wasn't on the schedule.
Mr. Dookie Fly Swatter and
the Haunted Garage!
If you took 80s slasher movies and put it in a blender with metal and punk rock, you're gonna get Haunted Garage.
Dookie and his crew were almost like making horror movies, horror punk.
But the gag is, you're in the splash zone.
It is splatter rock. It is chainsaw rock and roll.
Not only chainsaw them, but would pull the guts out and spread them all over the place.
It's like going to a horror movie, except it's actually happening.
There was this real fervor at the time about shock rock, how bad it was for the kids.
The shock value was exactly what I wanted.
I look over and I see Dookie with his arms on fire.
The flashes from the rear end.
He got brain surgery live on stage.
Whenever you find something weird, we'll give a use for it.
It's not an act that we put on to go on stage.
We were real.
There was some shit being exercised right there.
That was the raw stuff.
You walk out of there feeling like you've maybe left the planet for a little while.
Their legacy is they were unique.
They did things that weren't being done, and they did things that were outside of people's comfort zones.
Dookie was always just ahead of his time on that.
But it really rocked hard. I mean, he had really good musicians in the band.
We didn't want it to be only this deep. We wanted it to be this deep.
It's Haunted Garage. That's the whole point of taking things too far.
They just were doing it to have a good time and make you laugh.
It was always fucking fun.
Actually, we're a lot more stable than I think Bill Cosby.
I don't know how to explain it. It exploded.
Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons.
Tom Waits was there.
We blind Axl Rose.
When you're sitting between Dookie and Elvira, it doesn't get any cooler than that.
There were lines around the block to see Haunted Garage. They were the it band at the time.
Those guys were gods to who they were gods to.
Hey,
He's an icon of the underground exploitational genre.
Punk rock god of Hollywood.
Bela Lugosi's horrible punk rock grandson.
G.G. Allen, but fun.
He's like a friendly vampire.
He was LA's Peter Lorre.
You need somebody in a movie, that's the guy that you want.
Roger Ebert said it's the worst movie he's ever seen. Cold Steel, Sharon Stone? Who knew? He had a great writing career.
He puts everything he's got into it. He made his whole life his art.
I think that the whole world should know about it.
Now I'm gonna cry.
Slam, 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 slam.
Wait a minute, you're gonna get this.
Oh, thank you.
Nicely done.
Yeah, I'm
Nicely
working
done.
on it very, very slowly. If any, again, I'll put this out there anywhere. If any angel investors want to grease the wheel a little bit. But yes, there was a couple shots from CIA in there.
I was gonna say that feels perfect for that venue, and you've definitely captured the feeling of that vibe and that era. Well done.
Thank you, thank you. Any last things you want to promote or throw out into the world? Any opinions that you haven't expressed yet?
Well, I just want to express a bit of gratitude for sitting down and talking about the classic monsters and fandom and all things horror and cinema. Always a pleasure. And if anyone wants to follow along with my monster journeys and see what's going on in the Halloween world, you can do that on my Instagram.
I had a banner.
Look at that. Oh, that's so nice of you. Thank you. Yeah.
Of course,
that's
I
my
always
website.
remember to put it out in the last minute of the show.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah, at AJ Danna on Instagram, and that's my website, ajdanna.com, to see what's going on in the Halloween world in Southern California and beyond, because I'm always trying to see what's fresh and new in the world of monsters.
Yeah, and please keep us updated, and also check out his podcast, Real Monsters, REEL, right?
That's correct. Thank you, sir.
On all the places that you get podcasts. That's actually where I first I think you messaged me, but I knew who you were already. I was listening to your podcast, so this was inevitable.
Well,
and
I'm glad
hopefully you'll come
happened.
back sometime,
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm glad that this was a good crossover of shows.
Yes, thank you for enduring my punishment. 2 hours, not too bad, not too bad.
I will talk about monsters for much longer than 2 hours. You're talking to the right person here.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much. I think we did it.
Yes, we did. Thank you, Kevin.
And Chessie has one last joke for us. I don't think
All right,
she's
let's
here
hear it.
anymore, but what's a zombie's favorite car to drive? A monster truck.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's good. I
there you
like
go.
the Halloween puns. Very good.
Oh, I have a monster truck here. Let's see. Have you seen this?
Oh, that is cool. Very cool.
It really has nothing to do with Phantom except for branding, but I'm a sucker and I bought it, so you win, Universal Monsters.
Well, since I'm at the end of the show, I guess I'll tell a joke. I do have a mummy joke, but since we're wrapping things up, it might take too long to unravel.
And different show every night. Different show every night. All right, everybody. I don't know when I'm going to do this again, but I will do it again. Stay tuned. Follow me on Instagram. That's where I hang out most. Check out my other show, Von Pod, for my more normal, non-themed interviews. If you like Gwar, I do a show about Gwar, talking about monsters and music and masks. Yeah, that's a whole nother rabbit hole of monsters and masks and music. Anyways, thanks for coming. I'm going to end it with my intro song again because it's just so cool. Bye. Found a phantom, found a phantom, found a phantom.